This week, we're going to look at a podcast Tom Myers did with Patrick McKeown on the Oxygen Advantage podcast. Obviously, full disclosure, I'm an Oxygen Advantage advanced coach in terms of their breath work and how their breathing programs and techniques. So there is some bias here into why I want to look at this video. I do enjoy this podcast, and that's why it came up. But listening to it, there was a few key things in here that I thought Tom Myers describes it in a way that is very interesting, accessible, and a few key things in it that I just thought was worth talking about here in this forum. So let's actually look at some of these clips that I found interesting.
About the rib cage here, because this is a tensegrity. Let me get far enough away so you can see it. It's a tensegrity structure. And
the structure he's talking about here, I think, is quite interesting. And the reason why I wanted to highlight it is because we don't want to think about the breathing system, the breathing mechanics and biomechanics in terms of levers. We want to think about it in this push-pull system. So if you have tightness, injuries, bad posture in certain locations within that breathing matrix, maybe it's a tight serratus muscle, maybe it's a tight pectoral minor or major or something, but it shows that in this system he's describing that then it's going to put pressure on another part of the system, maybe not close to it, but in another location, which is then going to lead to poor breathing and then leads to these negative and dysfunctional breathing effects that we see thereafter. I just thought it's quite an interesting way to view breathing mechanics and how improving it can actually improve the overall system when you're looking at one specific area related to another.
But yet, 25% of kids, studied children, are persistently mouth breathing. 50% of the adult population during sleep are mouth breathing. And
I've heard these statistics before, and maybe you have as well. I just think it's very interesting these statistics are brought up because it does magnify the problem and how many people actually do mouth breathe without realizing it. How many of you viewing this, or after you've watched this video, you're going to scroll through social media? How many of you are holding your breath ever so slightly as you're scrolling through social media because something's caught your attention? It's made you just pause for a second. How often are we looking down at our phones and having that forward head posture? I just think these statistics highlight these kind of now normal mannerisms and normal mechanics that we're using, and that obviously they're having a negative side effect more than a positive one.
There's over 100 joints in the rib cage.
I feel like it's a fact I probably knew but then have forgotten, but over 100 joints in the rib cage is kind of mind-blowing, and deserves a place in my mind palace to remember this fact that, yeah, 100 joints in the rib cage is crazy. Yeah, let me know what you think about that.
Kidneys are moving a half a kilometer a day with the breath.
So this is something I definitely didn't know, but half a kilometer a day is your kidneys moving because of your breath, because of the 5 centimeter rise and fall as you breathe, is a mind-blowing fact, is a fact that you need to remember because it might come up in a pub quiz. But half a kilometer a day is actually crazy the more I think about it.
Kidneys are riding an elevator up and down the psoas muscle, and it's 5 centimeters of breath, and that's 17,000 times a day. 119 joints are being moved.
The movement of the internal organs, the 5 centimeter a day is for your kidneys, the movement of the joints and stuff that's going around in the breathing mechanics that Tom Myers here describing. Yeah, when you think about it, it does make you understand how complicated a system this is. And maybe for you out there, how little it's trained. I think it does highlight that it's a very complicated system that is maybe underutilized or under-analyzed when it comes to optimizing it, because we just assume that because we can breathe since we were born, therefore it's optimal. But automatic doesn't mean optimal, as I've said before. And I think it very much applies when Tom Myers is just listing off these facts here in this clip.
I want to say about this is, think of it as a piston. The organs are a piston that are going down in the body on the inhale, back up. And the rib cage and the belly wall and the spine are the cylinder around the piston, and that's going up. You can see
this concept, I think, is really important when we start talking about pistons, because it's maybe a bit easier to imagine this as a more of a mechanical mechanism like your car. For you out there that have a petrol car still, is if there's a kink in that cylinder, then your car's not going to fire properly. Even if there's a slight deviation within that cylinder, it means that you're not going to get the right combustion in that engine to create the power, and therefore it's affected thereafter. And how many of us are sat for 8 hours a day but spend an hour in the gym? How many of us are looking at our phones all day, or have had previous injuries or things that are going to affect the posture and everything else that goes on with our breathing, to then those small kinks are going to lead to these negative effects because of this philosophy that he's talking about, this kind of cylinder and piston look of the breathing mechanics.
Your audience already knows I call breath as the essential element in vitamin M, which is vitamin movement.
This was very interesting because actually I have a factor right here for you. 80% of your movement comes from your breathing mechanics. So having good breathing mechanics is going to get you 80% of the way there to being good movement. The other 20% is going to be down to training, to natural talents, physical attributes, and et cetera, et cetera. But 80% of your breathing is going, 80% of your movement is going to come from your breathing. And I often think this is an underthought about thing when it comes to athletes. And when I'm training athletes, when I'm coaching people, the benefits don't just come from the biochemistry aspects, but improving that movement within that athlete by just improving breathing mechanics and optimizing them for that individual biology.
Because you're doing this 17,000 times a day. There's no other movement that you repeat 17,000 times a day that we know of.
And again, I want to go back to this 17,000 times a day repetition of breathing, because I think this is actually a very important thing to understand, is that it's something you do 17,000 times a day. Imagine if you lifted your hand 17,000 a day, you're picking up a pen 17,000 a day, or you're picking up a mug of tea 17,000 times a day. You're not going to go, oh, well, this is optimal for my growth in my bicep. I don't need to do anything more. I just need to keep doing this. Obviously not. Obviously, the way to optimize bicep growth, particular muscle growth, is overloading the system, time under tension, etc., etc. We all know this. We don't need to get into it. So why do we think an automatic system is optimal, like breathing, when actually, when we can drill down, we can drill into the biomechanics, the biochemistry, the psychophysiological aspects, and have exercises and stuff to improve those muscles, for want of a better word there, by doing these exercises to improve that and get a positive effect of something that we're doing 17,000 times a day.
And you know what's
Certainly
fascinating
not.
as well, when you were talking about as well the movement of the liver, that every time the diaphragm is moving, it's massaging the internal organs, it's helping with lymph drainage, etc. as well.
This is another thing that I think is under realized when it comes to breathing. Obviously, we've seen people like Wim Hof use breathing to great effect into fighting off injected diseases under a lab experiment, and he was managed to eradicate some of the negative effects of having a virus, or it might have been bacteria was injected into him. I can't remember. Someone go Google that. But once this video ends, and tell me in the comments below. But what we need to understand here is the connection between these systems, between the lymphatic system, which runs automatically, breathing, which runs automatically. But if we can manipulate and optimize good biomechanics, that means that we can push and keep that system flowing of the lymphatic system. Those little stations in the lymphatic system are all over our body, but having good lymphatic drainage means that we can become healthier, which means we prevent ourselves from becoming to the point where we can't perform at our best because we can't clear that viral load, which we can start to see positive effects of that if we start implementing breathing strategies to help with that.
My biomechanics of breath are very much, you're thinking nose down and I'm thinking pelvis up a lot.
This kind of echoes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the video about how the tensioner structure is structured, that these are pulling on one another. As he's saying that quite often the way I coach, and I've been taught to coach, is thinking nose down, diaphragm down, and Tom Myers here is talking about structural from the pelvis up. These things are all connected. So it's a circle. There's no bad way to start here. There are biochemical assessments that I use, there are biomechanical assessments that I use. Essentially, they all tell me a story. Whether I start in the biomechanical aspect or not really depends on individuals and what they're saying to me when I first meet them. But what we're learning from this is that you do need to be thinking toes to the top of the head, top of the head down to your toes, and you need to be thinking in both lines in this kind of two-way street, as because these are talking to one another. And if you think in this two-way street, then you can really get the whole picture of how to optimize someone to have good breathing mechanics. So I think that's really important to be thinking in that way, and maybe it's going to change my philosophy a bit and my coaching a bit over the future now to kind of think more in that way.
You really walk back and put your tailbone closer there, you're going to slump. Yes, that is going to affect your breathing. It's going to stop the front of your diaphragm and push all of the work into the back of your diaphragm. That's what happens when the front collapses. Now come back up onto top and go forward so your pubic bone goes down and your back arches. If your back arches enough, you will have such a sway in your back that you will have now cut off the back of the diaphragm. So now try taking a deep breath. That's all going to happen in the front.
I just put this clip here at the end because, not because it was particularly mind-blowing to me or anything. A lot of it was stuff that I actually already knew anyway, but I just thought it was quite an interesting clip or an interesting demonstration that you can do right now as you're watching this video, and give it a go and see what it feels. Comment below if you're giving it a go as we're talking right now, and tell me what you think about it. Tell me, what do you feel when you rock back to your to your pubic bone, and what do you feel when you rock back to your tailbone? Do you feel those differences? Can you get a balance in between those where you feel like you can breathe a lot better? And as you stand up and finish this video and you stand up and you go get yourself a cup of coffee, do you all of a sudden be like, I'm struggling to breathe into the back, I'm struggling to breathe into the front? Maybe it's a bit of both, maybe it's 60-40. And then maybe you're thinking, maybe my breathing mechanics do need to be optimized a bit there. Interesting little self-experiment that you can run whilst we're watching this video or after this video or whatever. But comment below because I'd like to hear what you think. Okay, that's everything I really wanted to share in this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Kind of breaking this down. Go search out the full podcast if you want to listen to it, as always. But these are my thoughts and my takeaways of listening to this podcast. I really enjoyed listening to this. It's a very interesting concept. Probably going to get anatomy trains and give that a read. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure before you go, you do all that great stuff for the algorithm, like, shares, hit subscribe if you would like to. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it means the world to me to see people subscribing to this video and be giving them the content that I am interested in. Even if you just want to listen to me drone on about the things I'm interested in, I do really appreciate seeing you sub to this channel. And I enjoy making these videos. So yeah, I'll see you all very soon. If you want coaching, if you want the free guides, then there's my website, there's links to my bios on my socials, links to my bio here, so you know what all that stuff is. Anyway, I will see you very soon on the next one. Have a good time. Have a great day.